Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Zenway podcast. I'm your host Zenway. I spent the last decade at the intersection of tech and also social sciences. This podcast is all about life, career, and tech. So today I have a very special guest. I am very happy to have a dear friend Xian on the podcast today because I've always enjoyed all the conversations I have with her. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your journey so far, right, Xian? Around how you wanted to actually pursue education, but went into studying music, then into risk consulting, and right now really trying to find your way into education, right? So I find that journey really fascinating. So first of all, thank you so much for being on the show, and why not you introduce yourself a little bit to everyone that is listening?
All right, thanks for having me to begin with. But actually, that question, it seems like a very simple question, but it's actually a very difficult question to answer because humans are very multifaceted. But anyway, hi, I'm Xian Hui. And I guess, from a career perspective, I guess I am in a limbo state at the moment. I majored in music back in undergrad, went into risk consulting, like what you mentioned, completely different field. And now I'm trying to navigate myself back into education, which is an area that I've always wanted to be in to begin with, actually. So,
let's talk a little bit about education, right? Because at the end of the day, from Asian family standpoint, it's not a very typical career path that is being encouraged, unfortunately. So can you share a little bit about what got you into thinking that you want to get into education in the first place?
Right. I think the idea came about when I was really young. I started having piano lessons maybe when I was 4, and I was very fond of my piano teacher, for, I guess, very superficial reasons. I found her to be, firstly, she just dressed up really well, had a way with the students, and I guess I found that really charming. And I thought to myself, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I get to be someone like her when I grow up? So that idea of being a teacher has always been at the back of my mind since I was young. And then came a time when I was 12, so that means when I was in the 6th, and my primary school teacher actually sat me next to this boy that I was not fond of.
Wow.
And my task was actually to support him in terms of academics. What that looks like would be helping him with his homework and answer any questions that he had about schoolwork, right? And I detested it, actually.
You're probably wondering, is this like a punishment? What did I
pretty
do
much
wrong?
And my teacher knew that I was not fond of him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but over the months, we actually grew closer, and I actually saw improvement in his studies as well. And I think the moment for me was when I found that he actually did pretty well for UPSR. And when I found out about his results, I felt really fulfilled. I think that moment itself was like wow, I think this is something that I really want to do. Like, I want to have a career or some sort of work that would make me feel this way.
Yeah.
So that idea just has been sticking with me throughout my life, pretty much.
I wish that your primary school teacher is really smart about it as well, because I remember that when I was in I think standard 2, which we were 8 years old, right? I remember keep forgetting my homework, and the only way my primary school teacher was showing love to me was tough love, and I remember needed to do my homework in the corridor. So only if I have a friend that really guided me with my homework back then as well. But it really goes to show that the kind of role models you have from since young in terms of education is really spectacular. So then tell us a little bit about then what happened. Then you went into studying music, right? So how did that happen, and what was the consideration about that?
So for that, basically, I went to the States, right, for my tertiary education. And in the university I was at, there was no major in education available, but there was a minor. So I did minor in education, but when it came to choosing a major, I was thinking, oh, I just want to choose a subject that I was interested in. And honestly did not think that much about future planning, right? I knew I was interested in music, and my university was really into ethnomusicology, so world music, learning about different music cultures. And I thought, oh, that is something that's really different, and I don't think I would be able to learn that back home. So that's why I decided to major in music. But having said that though, me being Asian as well, I needed like some backup plan, I guess.
To buy insurance.
Yeah, pretty much. So then when it came to choosing subjects, I also picked, I guess, like the safe classes that would, make me look more all-rounded in terms of resume. So I also took I guess you can call it so-called Asian traditional subjects like math, econ, data analytics, so on and so forth, just to like balance out my CV. So yeah, although I majored in music, I also did a couple of other classes just as like a safety net, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm always kind of like interested in all these very non-conventional kind of majors, right? Like for example, there are people who major in history, for example,
Yeah.
and I think majoring in music is something that is pretty rare, at least among the circle that I know. Can you share a little bit about what do you actually study? When what are the kind of subjects that you learn in? You mentioned about musicology, right? So it's not just about making music at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. So I think when I mentioned that I major in music, a lot of people tend to ask me, oh, so do you like specialize in a certain instrument? Although I did play the piano growing up, but in my uni, we actually we don't specialize in a specific instrument because they were trying to do this whole like holistic curriculum thing, right? So we had to do music theory, history, and also performance. And I pretty much did you can call it random, but I would call it interesting, different kind of subjects. So that would mean like introduction to like South Indian music. I also did Japanese taiko, what else? Chinese ensemble, and also I think my school also offered like West African music, Indonesian gamelan, really just music from all different culture and all different parts of the world, right? And yeah, like you mentioned, it's really not just about like learning the music itself, but you also learn about the history part of it. How did the instrument and the music culture develop over the years throughout history? So it comes from different angles, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. And in terms of were there it's quite a diverse I guess types of music that you mentioned. Were the I guess the teachers or the lecturers from the respective culture, or they are just very experienced in that particular music field?
Right. I think it's a mix of both. So we actually had an Indonesian gamelan like specialist who came all the way just to teach gamelan. We also have different professors who were not from, let's say, India, but were very interested in South Indian music, and they actually went over to India to specialize in that particular field.
Interesting.
And decided to come back here to teach the subject as well.
Got it.
So it's a mix of both.
Right.
So it's very interesting to see,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. And when you mentioned about minoring in education, right? Then what kind of subjects do you do? Do you do like developmental psychology?
Yeah.
Or do you do like I guess different learning pedagogy and learning styles and stuff like that?
Yeah, we definitely had a variety of subjects. I personally did developmental psychology, which was my favorite subject. We also did psychology of reading, right? Sociology, education sociology as well. And we also had to do, it depends on which subject you want to take, but there were also classes where you can teach in the local schools and then write like your reflections about it as well.
Yeah, so you did that as well. So
Yeah.
did that kind of like reinforce your, I guess, your passion and curiosity in, eventually
Yeah.
going into the education field?
Yeah,
What,
definitely.
do you have any stories that maybe like kind of reinforce like, this is the right path, or like it feels like you can do this, right?
Right. I think the one subject that really sparked my curiosity was developmental psych, which was one of my favorite classes. I think in that particular subject, we learned a lot about a child's developmental milestone. And prior to going to uni, I actually did teach in a kindergarten. So being able to kind of like map what I learned to what I had seen prior to that was really fascinating, to just see what their developmental milestones were and how they were forming their identity throughout those years as well. And I think I personally find that age group very fascinating. So yeah, I think after learning that subject, I was like, wow, I think this is something that I would want to pursue in.
Yeah. And fast forward, is it a four-year degree
Yeah.
as well, right? So fast forward 4 years, and then what happened, right? Because it sounds like you're pretty set already. Your interest
Right.
is all aligned, right? You've got the necessary, education in place as well. Then you went into something that perhaps quite common in terms of, as a first step, as a stepping stone for a lot of careers, right? But not necessarily for education.
Right.
So then, what happened over there, right?
Yeah, good question. What happened? I guess at that point of my life, when I came back to Malaysia, I was actually teaching in my own alma mater. I was teaching in a national Chinese primary school, and I actually really liked the work.
Wow.
I really enjoyed teaching and just being with the students.
Right.
But the thing that was lacking was really like the environment, right, that I was in. So all my colleagues were pretty much aunties, right? They were like my teachers when I was still in primary school. So although I liked the work, but that was not the kind of environment I saw myself growing in. Like I guess when I first graduated, I wanted to be like in a vibrant, young environment.
Yeah.
And that was just not
Right.
it. So at the
It's
point,
hard to connect when your colleagues are, of a different life stage and,
correct.
all that, right?
They'll be
Yeah.
talking to me about their kids who are my age.
Right.
Like, sure, I mean, I can, have those kind of conversations, but
Right.
I wanted more.
Yep.
I wanted
course.
more.
Yep.
So I think at that point of time, my then boyfriend, who was more into like the corporate route, right, like consulting, investment banking, he proposed an idea to me, which is just give corporate a try, right? Just give it 1 year, go in, just to see how it's like. After that, decide whether it is for you or not. At that point of time, I was honestly a bit skeptical because I still had this whole like, oh, I'm really into like social cause, public education, that sort of mindset.
Right.
But-
Was there a story that made it even harder to embark on this 1 year trial, right? There must be, you've been teaching at the school. There must be some encouraging
Right.
stories that, maybe it was a feedback from the teachers or the parents or even the students as well. Right? Was there a story that stand out to you when you were teaching at that primary school?
There are a couple,
Yeah.
and I think the one that I always think about was when I actually taught English to this class, and I think they were in standard 4, so primary 4, like about like 10 years old, right? And there was this one particular student. You can tell that he's generally more like introverted, it's more shy, right? But then in my class, I found that he was very interactive, right? He was actually participating in the activities, and he was engaged. I could tell that he was engaged throughout the class, right? And in terms of academic performance, I think he was above average, nothing much to worry about. But then when it came to like the parent-teacher conference, his mom actually came up to me and asked me like, is my son okay, right? He's already going for one tuition class, right, for English. Do you think I need to send him more? I was like, oh, but I don't think you need to worry that much about your son, because I think your son is doing more than just fine, right? Like he's really participative in
Right.
class, and she was actually quite shocked to hear that. And she told me this one line was that my son is only like this when he's with you. And I was like, oh wow, like that. I think that was really something.
Right.
To
Did you
me.
dig deeper in terms of like what did you do differently that this person has responded so well to you?
I never got to sit in to observe like how other teachers did, so I don't
Fair enough,
think
yeah.
I really have
Yeah,
that
yeah,
insight.
yeah.
But I think perhaps what I may have done differently is that I didn't really stick to curriculum.
So you're the fun teacher. It's like, yeah, you know, no need to follow all the books and all the time, you know.
I mean, I try to cover whatever I needed to cover, but
Yeah.
when there's extra time, I would do something different. So I think during that particular time, it was Deepavali, right?
Okay.
So, and coincidentally, there
Yeah.
was actually this one Indian girl in class,
Right.
And I wanted to take this opportunity to get the students to learn more about the celebration.
Oh my goodness.
So I remember.
Yeah, that
what
would have
did
been
I
so
do?
fun.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I actually got this girl
Yeah.
to come forward to share about her Deepavali experience.
Right.
What does her family do
Uh-huh.
to prep for it? Prior to the day, on the day, and after as well. And she even brought muruku for all her
Wow.
classmates, right? And it was just really fun. I still remember it was like a Q&A feedback session, not feedback, sorry, like it was a Q&A session for
Yeah.
the girl as well. All her friends would be asking, so what do you do on this? Why do you prepare this? And the girl would just be answering questions, and everyone was just having fun. So I guess that was something that
Yeah.
I intentionally did,
Wow.
to make things different. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been super
Yeah.
fun. I think if you did that, then definitely I can see why the person was so much more engaged. Yeah. Okay, so then coming back to this, like, okay, you've got so much, you had so much fun,
Right.
and you've made an impact in someone's life, and now you're about to consider going to the dreaded the boring corporate robots world, right?
Yes.
So then, how do you felt like and then going into it, right?
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, right, I was very skeptical about it,
yeah.
but I decided to just, take the leap anyway. And I realized that it wasn't as bad as I thought, right? I think my impression of the corporate field, like before I went in, was like, oh, everyone's like mean, trying to, I guess, like backstab each other. I
There's
think
a lot of distrust.
a lot of distrust, a lot
all
of
for
like,
themselves, yeah.
like just trying to like climb up the rank. I had, I guess, a very negative impression, maybe due to media, I think. And it also didn't help, right, that the university that I was in was really like anti-capitalism,
Right.
that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess I had that image, right? But after going in, I realized that it really is not as bad as I thought. And in fact, I had a lot of fun. I think I managed to find meaning in the work that I did at the department that I was in. People were great, right? Very supportive, and a lot of people were perhaps around like the same age as I was, and I could connect with them really well. So yeah, I think the environment was just really conducive, and I managed to find meaning out of the work that I did. So that's pretty much why
Right.
I stayed on, right, for 7 years.
Yeah,
actually, a lot
yeah.
longer than I thought, honestly.
1 year became 7 years, so it's like
Yeah.
7x return.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So, but then like, okay, so how do you choose, I guess, consulting as the path to go into, right? Because you could have so many different options as well.
Right.
Why consulting? And on top of that, risk management is something that if you have never been in an industry or never been part of a corporate, you probably think that it's something quite elusive, right? So how do you end up in that area as well, right?
Right. I think there's really no fancy story to this. It was just that I basically cold emailed the HR PIC
Right.
from the firm, and she replied. We met up. We had such a great talk, honestly, because she herself, I think she studied journalism in Paris.
Right.
And then she found her way into HR. And when I was, sharing my story as well, I think she could relate. And after we made that connection, she basically told me like, okay, I think there are two departments, like two roles that you could consider. One required like really strong proficiency in Malay, which I didn't have. And the other one was the one I went in. So that's pretty much how I got into risk consulting.
How old were you? And you just randomly found this person's email and you decided to just go for it? Or?
Right. I got that email from another friend actually.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I was about 25.
Right.
24, 25 when
Right.
I went in.
I'm starting to see a pattern because obviously we talk about like cold outreaches and cold emails and stuff like that. This is probably the probably not the first time, but the first few times you have done it, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Interesting, right? I think like being able to kind of just do that cold email outreach and having a great conversation is also a skill to be learned as well. I don't think I've ever prior to this have ever really did a cold outreach and say like, hey, I'm really interested in joining your organization and this is what I think I can bring to the table. So yeah, that's something to learn from you, I think.
I think honestly, like pure luck, fate, whatever you want to call it.
Everything is time and opportunity at the end of the day, right? But you need to be what people always say, that you need to be ready for that opportunity. Kind of almost like create your own luck, right?
Yeah.
I also like this part where they talk about increasing your surface area for luck to stick.
Okay.
So you're kind of doing that, right? So I really like that analogy where like you're just sowing as much seeds as possible. For the surface area to grow, for luck to be able to stick more likely to stick, right? So I really like that approach as well.
And by doing that, I guess you have nothing to lose, right? Even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. But hey, we're all faced by like what if I embarrass myself? What if they laugh at
that's
me?
true.
That kind of stuff.
Right?
So kudos on you, like good the brave 25-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. So, risk management, tell us a little bit about that, right? Because for some of us that, perhaps were not in, I guess, the risk management department and all that kind of stuff, it can come across as quite check the box kind of exercise, or, it could be really just compliance related. Can be quite dry, right? So can you explain it, in like, I guess like we are 5 years old and, what kind of kept you going for 7 years as well?
I think, okay, if I have to put it in like really layman terms, what risk management essentially is that you want to put in certain controls in place so that the organization doesn't face any sort of crisis. However, if shit really hits the fan, right, you would be ready to respond to it and not having to go through such a huge impact because you have certain measures in place already. So I guess if I have to really give an example, so let's say fire, right? Fire is always like a hazard. So what risk management would look like in this example would be, to put, I guess, fire insulation materials all around your premise so that you won't, your premise won't catch fire. However, in the event, if it really happens, then you have certain measures in place, like you have like the fire alarm, you have the fire extinguisher, so that even if there's a fire, it wouldn't turn out to be that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it also includes like, I guess like escalation protocols and,
correct.
emergency processes, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
Correct.
Was there an interesting project that you worked on that kind of stuck with you, throughout the 7 years? What stands out to you in terms of like some of the interesting things that you have done?
Right.
Yeah.
I think before diving into that, I wanted to mention that actually risk management is such a broad area, right?
Yeah.
And what I personally did was this specific area called business continuity. So what it is that we come up with contingency plans for clients. In the event they face an operational crisis, they would know how to respond to it,
right,
and how they would also recover their business, so that there won't
continue to operate, hence the term continuity.
Right. Correct, essentially that. Right. And I think one of the more interesting projects that I did was actually a healthcare provider. So I think a lot of all the other projects that I did was very what do you call it, like very corporate office type of setup, right? But this one, we were looking into a hospital. So we actually had to speak to doctors and nurses as well. Like, so what do you do in the event of, there's a fire, but you are midway conducting and performing, right, an operation, right? What do you do, right? How do you quickly sew someone up? And after sewing that person up, where should this person go to? Right? Is there like a specific triage area, for this particular patient? And how do you transport this patient to which hospital do you want to go to, right? To resume the operation. Right. We also talk about, how
power
do you...
as well, right?
Yeah,
it always happens in movies where, power outage. We have 5 patients in ICU on life support. What's going to happen?
Correct.
It's going to fail in 30 minutes, 1 hour.
Exactly. Exactly. Those on life support as well. ICU patients. How about walk-ins? Do you turn them away, or do you transfer them to somewhere else?
Are there options? But it's a fire. You're walking in like, hello.
Oh no! So they have already walked in, and then the fire happened.
Oh no!
Yeah. They're not walking in while the fire is happening.
I'm like, whoa! You have to be. I mean, it's either a fire is non-visible, or you are like desperate.
Or delusional. Yeah. And so those are patients who are not admitted. Right.
Okay.
And when a fire happens, how should the management deal with them?
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Right. And I would imagine that all these things would have been really tested during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So in terms of what were some of the advices that you were giving to some of these organizations? Obviously, I wouldn't say that everybody foresee this would have happened. But how did that help your clients, right? What are some of the things that you've done that actually help your clients in the end?
Right. A lot of times, even prior to the pandemic, we already started talking to clients about remote working, right? But the mindset was not there. Right.
It's the last thing that will happen.
Right? So although we would have already talked them through how do you actually come up with a remote working arrangement, it was only truly activated, and tested when the pandemic happened, right? And obviously right now we are living, at a time
very
when
used to it.
Everyone's already talking about remote working, so it's already the culture. But I think back then that was one of the advice that we gave, but they were quite hesitant, to go for it. But times have changed now, I would say. Right.
Were there any? Did they invest in any? Let's say, like for example, you gave the advice that here we talk about remote working, right? And we know that risk management and some of these things requires investment, infrastructure and all that kind of stuff, right? Did they invest anything, or is it really like pandemic? That time is like, okay, we've got no choice. We need to buy stuff and implement, right?
Oh, we've got a mix of both.
Right.
It really depends on the culture, the senior management team's view as well. So some of them, let's say if they were more PC heavy, we would have already advised them, to look into laptops already.
Right.
Some took the advice, some didn't.
Right.
So it was really a mix of both.
Right.
I would say.
Those who bought the laptops must be like, oh, thank goodness we did this, right?
Correct. So the funny thing about the work that I did, right, was that you can only kind of see the fruits of your labor when
there's a disaster.
Yeah, correct.
Something bad happens.
Correct. When something really bad happens, and firstly, you do not wish that upon
to happen,
right? On any organization, and secondly, it also rarely happens. I would say, right?
Yeah.
So when the pandemic happened, that was really when our plans got tested, and I think what I found really fulfilling, right, was when one of our clients actually came up to us and said, like, hey, we are so glad that we engaged you to help us with business continuity prior to the pandemic, because when, the whole movement control order was in place, we were a lot, I guess, more ready, in terms of responding to the whole MCO situation as well.
Right. So it was really tricky. I think one of the clients that we were supporting, but obviously from a well-being angle, when we were at Thoughtful, was really they're talking about how they needed to do the A team and B team kind of situation as well. There's quite a lot of them that did that. And obviously there are a different site to ensure that business can continue.
Correct.
So in case your A team touch wood, everybody kena
Yes.
COVID, and it was infected, the other team can continue working as well, right? So I think they must be really grateful for at least being a step ahead of what happened, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, 7 years is a long time. How did you... I know that you mentioned that it is at the back of your mind in terms of education and stuff like that, right? Were there anything that kind of, from time to time, just kind of like veer its head? It's like, hey, education, hey, or like something that maybe sustain your... What did you do outside of consulting to really just sustain that curiosity or maybe passion in education, right? What was that that kept the ember alive, so to speak, right?
I think, like you said, it was always at the back of my mind, but I've got to be honest though, like the working hours I had was really long. So even though I wanted to do like voluntary work, I really could not afford to do that.
Yeah.
But how I kind of kept myself being in the loop of the development was like just followed news, and also sometimes there were like online conferences related to education that I would partake in as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just to find out more.
Right.
But that was really all there was to it because I didn't have the capacity to do more.
Right.
So I guess to answer your question, right, about what was the, at which point I decided like, all right, I wanted to, refocus and go back into education. I think for me, when I entered the firm, I realized that, hey, it's not that bad, right? And that's where I decided to set 3 goals, right, for myself.
Right.
And then came a time when I actually already met those goals. And when it came to asking myself, okay, so what's next? Right?
Yeah.
Can I see myself going up the ranks? I couldn't answer that question.
Right.
Or I couldn't see what are the goals that I wanted to set for myself in the firm. Although, there were still a lot of learning opportunities, right? And that was when I knew like, okay, I think I need to make the switch, right? And thankfully, I knew that education was the field that I wanted to go in. So that was when I was like, okay, it's time to, redirect, refocus, and try to navigate back into the industry.
Yeah, I guess I had a similar, story as well, in the sense that I've set some goals, managed to kind of hit all of them. And then when I look around, I guess my seniors and the leaders,
correct.
I started asking myself, like, do I want to be like them? And
yes,
then you're like,
exactly.
maybe not,
like good for them.
Yes, of course.
But I just couldn't see myself being like them.
For sure. Yeah. So I can totally understand, and sometimes I think, consulting starter pack always includes a phase where you just don't have capacity and just so consumed by it, right?
Yeah.
So then I guess we kind of fast forward a little bit in terms of having a career break. So I'm on a career break, and I remember that when you first started your career break, you're like, I just want to chill. If you want me to come to your house and cook breakfast for you, I can. I'm like, yes, I need somebody to cook breakfast for me, because I'm still busy working, right? And that was like, it's like Amanda and I was like, it would be great if we can have you as our friend that will cook breakfast for both of us, right?
It did not happen, but it happened in other ways.
No. I mean, jokes aside, I think it was. I think you were probably if I remember correctly, you were probably among the close group of friends that we have. You were probably one of the first few that took a career break.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that, right? Because I'm on my 1 month plus into my career break. And I kid you not, there will be certain times where my toxic trait will come out and say like, I need to be a little bit more productive. Hence why we're recording a podcast now. but it's very hard for you to kind of like really be really focused. And there's a lot of games that you play with yourself, right?
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about how long has your career break been, and what are some of the things that you've been doing, and I guess the lessons learned of taking a career break. Nobody teaches us how to take a career break.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So tell us share that with us a little bit, right? How long has it been? What are some of the things you've learned, and kept yourself like your well-being in check, and productivity, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I quit my job last December, and it's August now, so it's been about 8 months. I think I was quite certain, right, that the moment I quit, like I just really needed to rest, right? Just needed to like not use my brain for a bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, take the opportunity to kind of like try out and venture back into education. So what I did was I actually took up a nannying job.
Wow.
Right. It's not like education, but basically there was this person that I follow on social media, and she talks about like respectful parenting, and that was an area that I've always been interested in. And she was, looking for a nanny, and I pretty much just applied for that job. So that was something that I took up during my career break, and I really enjoyed it.
Wow.
I learned a lot about parenting. Also, just it touches on education as well, right? Like how do you talk to kids? How do you raise them up? So that's one thing I did, and I'm currently part-timing in a kindergarten that I helped to set up long time ago, and that's what I've been doing as well. And it was just really nice, I guess, to kind of like venture back into teaching, because when I put in my resignation letter, a lot of my colleagues actually came up to me and asked, hey, so you plan to go back into teaching? And my standard answer was always like, adults just drain me so much, right? I don't think I have the patience and energy to teach anymore. And when this opportunity came up, I wasn't sure how
you would respond to it, right?
Correct. And then when I went in, and I realized that, oh my goodness, turns out I still have a lot of patience just for kids. Can't say the same for adults.
You compartmentalize.
Can't say the same for adults, but for kids, I think because I always give kids the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Can't say the same for adults, but
I get what you mean, right? I saw a line a while ago and talk about like the world really have no patience for you if you can't teach yourself just by Googling something for like 5 minutes,
Pretty much.
So unfortunately, the expectation and I mean the ease of access to information is as such that you got to be like extremely resourceful. So I kind of get what you mean when it comes to the adults as well.
Yeah. Correct.
And I guess maybe the question to ask is really that you went back into teaching 7 years later, you rediscovered that hey there's a lot of patience left, right? Great. Other aspects of education, has it changed? Did you find back the same magic that in the primary school? What did you observe that has changed over the course of 7 years? It could be that nothing has changed, which is very sad for the country, but
I think that I can't generalize this, right? But the kindergarten that I'm teaching at is really different, I would say, from our typical from our typical like Asian traditional upbringing. So the kindergarten that I'm teaching at, we use this approach called the Reggio Emilia approach, and basically we believe that children are their own individuals, and we see them as independent, capable and competent individuals, right? So our role as a teacher is not to like dump knowledge into them for them to absorb, but it's more of like getting them to explore their own interests, and guided by them, we will then step by step figure out how to, perhaps further develop a certain skill. But it's always like led by the child's interests. This is completely different from how, our national school system. So
factories, exams.
Correct. But one thing I do see is that I think parents these days are a lot more open to this kind of approach. I think if we were to dial it back to like a decade ago, if you were to try to sell this approach to parents would be like, oh, so you're not going to teach my kids ABC or like math, right? Like I need to prep my kids for primary school, right? And I think that focus is perhaps slowly shifting, and I think that is a wonderful thing to see, because I think kids that age, right, for like kindergarten, pre-K age, I think that is the best time for them to
just
develop
soaking as much as possible.
And like develop social emotional skills, right, rather than teaching like the academic stuff.
I see.
Because we believe that eventually they will pick it up. But it is, instilling that curiosity, that interest, trying to find out what they like, that's the focus. That
Yeah.
should be the focus for that
Right.
age group.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you mention the name of the approach one more time? Is
Right.
it Retro Emilia?
Oh, nice. Reggio Emilia.
Reggio Emilia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
it's basically a name of a town in Italy. And I think after World War II,
Right.
a couple of, I think not a couple, sorry, like there was one particular thought leader / teacher together with like the parents and other teachers of that town. They kind of came together to figure out how do they so like quote unquote like rehabilitate the children after like
Right.
the post-World War trauma.
Oh,
And they
wow.
decided that the way to actually get them to slowly transition is through play. So the whole approach is really led by the child's interest and is very play-based.
Right. I can't help, maybe this is an occupational hazard of mine. I can't help but to put on the tech / product kind of lens to this, right?
Okay.
Because it sounded like this approach is hyper personalized, right?
Right.
Because it's according to the kids' needs and stuff like that. And hence, in the product term, not very scalable. You get what I mean?
Right.
So like, how do you deal with? So I guess another way to ask the question is really that it's great if the class size is small. But let's say if it's 15 people, 20 people, is that approach still going to be applicable? Or generally speaking, the kindergarten that you work at, that's the reason why they tend to keep this class size small, for example?
Right. Yeah. That's exactly it. Right. We do keep the class size small, but on top of that, I think when we figure out that a particular kid has a certain interest, we will actually talk to the other kids about it. And
Okay,
try to
right.
gauge, if they are interested in it or not. And because one of the focus is also collaboration, right? That's what we want the kids to learn.
Wow.
So even if it's not necessarily your interest, how do you find ways to also like collaborate and work with other children?
Okay.
But I think at that age, instilling curiosity is
Yeah.
not as difficult, I
Right.
would say, right?
This is like, yeah, let's do this, let's do that.
Correct,
right,
correct.
right.
Like kids that age, they generally are already quite
Open,
curious,
yeah,
right? So if you
yeah.
were to introduce like a new topic, they will be like, oh, what's that? Why?
Yeah,
How?
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not
Okay.
as
Difficult.
Yeah, difficult, I would
got
say.
it, got
Yeah.
it. So how small do they keep the classes?
I think currently it's about like 15 to 20.
Okay,
Yeah,
got
in
it.
the class.
Right, makes sense. And so you've done that teaching and stuff like that. So what's ahead for you, right? So we had a chat, outside of this, and you've mentioned that perhaps in-class teaching itself may not be the be-all end-all that you wanted to do in education, and there are other things that you're interested in as well. Can you talk a little bit about what are you trying to work towards, right? And what have you learned along the way? Did you speak to anyone that perhaps have guided you along the way? Yeah.
Right. I mean, to be really honest, I
Yeah.
do not have like a clear end goal at the moment.
Yeah.
I think I'm still trying to figure it out.
Right.
I know what I don't want though, but
Uh-huh.
I don't.
Okay, what do you don't want?
What do I don't want? I think when people talk about education, it's very broad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, for sure,
And
yeah.
I think the one track that I'm not that keen to explore is
Management.
not management lah. But I think management is not too bad. But I think like assisting
Right.
students in application to tertiary education. I
Oh,
think that
got
particular
it,
track,
got
like
it.
prepping for SAT,
yeah,
coming
yeah.
up with personal statement, great, valuable work,
Yeah.
but not something that I can see
I see.
myself doing.
Okay.
In terms of my interest, honestly, is very broad at the moment, and I hope that in time I will figure it out slowly.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
I think
right?
if I were to name some, I'm interested in like education policy, curriculum transformation, to a certain extent, ed tech as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like you mentioned, I really enjoy teaching, but I feel that maybe for this season of my life, I want to do something different. However, I really can see myself going back into teaching,
Right.
perhaps when I'm
Right.
in the next phase of my life, right?
Right.
But for now, I want to do something else.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm exploring opportunities in private higher education institutions,
right.
and also education NGOs.
Right.
I am toying with the idea of grad school as well, but I'm thinking perhaps I need to kind of
Right.
figure out what my next career move is first before going to grad
Right.
school.
A good friend of mine always said that if you see one thing on a surface level, there's always 10 things behind it. So you've mentioned quite a few things there, which meant that you have done a lot of research. So it's not, I can imagine it being not easy to kind of navigate such a broad area, and obviously like, you know, you're only starting to do this after like 7 years, right? Can you share like, you know, what kind of support system do you have, or, you know, who do you speak to kind of get some guidance when it comes to that, right? So perhaps that could be a resource for anyone that wants to kind of really explore the education field as well.
Right. I think when I think of a support system, I really firstly have to thank like the friends around me. So I've been, you know, talking to my friends about my current situation, and almost always like they will be like, oh, I actually know someone who's currently in the education field doing so and so, right? Why not, you know, let me connect you with them. Maybe you guys can have a chat. And yeah, it's really just through that I've met a number of people, and just hearing about, you know, their journey into education as well. And that also kind of helped me give a sense of like, okay, what's a track that, you know, I'm interested in or not. And I've also just been, I guess, going back to cold messaging random people as well. Pretty much. There was this one lady that I met at one of these like online forums, conferences that I attended, and I just kind of dropped her a LinkedIn message. I was like, hey, I saw you speaking at this conference, you know, can I meet up with you to just like learn more about you know, the industry and your organization as well. So we'll be meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Nice.
Yeah, I've also reached out to this other individual that I've been following online for many years now. So she was involved in an education NGO and also the education ministry.
Wow.
So yeah, I think the one pretty amazing thing about this is that strangers that I've never met, they are so willing to just give me their time, like, you know, just to come out and meet and just share with me their journey, and just give advice as well. So this particular lady that I met, we talked for quite some time, and I think the one advice that she gave, maybe not advice, but I think the question that I had for her, right, was actually, do you have an end goal? Do you know what you already want to do, right?
Because you're trying to answer that for yourself as well.
Yeah, correct. And yeah, exactly, right? That is the question that I've been struggling myself, right? Like, what is my end goal? And her answer to me was, honestly, my end goal is as simple as I just want to be a subject matter expert in education. So whenever someone has a question related to education, the first thought that they have is, oh, I need to ask so and so about this and find out what her view is. It's really as simple as that. And when I heard that, I was like, oh wow, because I always thought that, you know, your angle has to be really specific, you know, very detailed, like I need to be in this particular line doing this particular work in this particular organization, for example. But just knowing that, hey, actually it's okay to have such a general goal. And also she was sharing with me that, you know, all her career opportunities were really not planned out, right? When she got into the education ministry was really when there was a political change, right, in the government, and that opportunity just came up, right? So it kind of made me think that, hey, it's kind of okay to not have everything all figured out at once. And just go through the motion.
I mean, from the sound of what you've shared, right, obviously I don't know the specific details around the behind the scenes, but it really just sounded like if her role were to be a subject matter expert, for example, then, for example, the you know, the opportunity to go into this field will arrive if, let's say, like, for example, if she you know, is the first person that they reach out to, if there's a change in government, if there's a change in I guess, you know, structural changes and stuff like that, she will be the first person that's been reached out to, right? And I think also she definitely would have done a lot of her networking and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly that. I think she really put herself out there. You know, she was documenting, you know, her journey, you know, in the industry. So a lot of people knew about her prior to all those opportunities. So when they think of these opportunities, she was the first person that came to their mind. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like it's very encouraging to hear that
Yeah.
people are so willing to help out people who are just starting off, right? Yeah. So in terms of the relating to education, we've always talked about various things, like you talk about developmental psychology, and one of our conversations that we recently had was your fascination around attachment styles.
Yeah.
So we had quite some fun on that topic. So I thought perhaps maybe to kind of as the final part of the conversation, let's talk a little bit about attachment styles because I think that it is closely related to education, and also most importantly it also affects us on how we showed up in our various facets of life as well, right?
Yeah.
So maybe let's have you talk about what is attachment styles,
Right.
Let's start with that first.
Okay. So like my understanding, right, of attachment style is that how your relationship with your primary caregivers when you were young actually kind of translates to how you show up in your other relationships in life after you've grown up. That could look like maybe in the area of like romantic relationships, or even like platonic friendship, or even just work. But I think it does show through the most through romantic relationships. Yeah. And there are 4 types of attachment styles. So there's secure, anxious, avoidant, and a mix of anxious avoidant, right? And I think before people think that this is like some woo-woo crap, right?
Pop psychology nonsense that is not backed
right.
by any research.
Yeah, but I think I just want to mention, right, that I first learned about attachment styles when I was doing my developmental psych course, right? Basically, there was this experiment called the strange situation experiment, where a baby is left in a room by the parent. Like, so the parent walks out, right, on the baby, and they basically want to see the reaction of the baby when the mom walks out of the room, and also when the mom returns to the room, right? And that particular experiment then kind of diverged into what we know as like present day attachment styles as well. So it really is not some woo-woo crap, right? I think there is a lot of basis,
I mean, developmental psychology, unfortunately, is not one of my favorite subjects, but I do remember that is actually one of the experiments that were taught as well. So I think the basis for that is really that it shows how secure a child is, right? And I think that it has a lot of implications, right? So how it shows up at work, and in relationships as well. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how it affects, I guess, when it comes to a relationship first, because I think that's probably something that is quite direct in that sense, right? So how could you give an example of how your different attachment styles can manifest in relationships, right?
Right. So I think before I dive into the examples, right, I just want to put a caveat, right, that although secure attachment is ideal, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other attachment styles, the other insecure attachment styles are bad, right? There are a lot of pros and benefits that do come out from that insecure attachment styles as well. Just wanted to put it out.
Let's talk. Before we go to my question, I'm fascinated with that, right? So you talk about, I guess there are actually different aspects of the different attachment styles that can be a benefit, or it can be used constructively, right?
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess let's say perhaps you can use avoidant attachment, right, as an example. So someone who is avoidant, perhaps back in their childhood, right, their primary caregiver was not necessarily emotionally unavailable. Was not emotionally available, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, so what happens is that the child does not feel supported emotionally, and they have to kind of cope with difficulties on their own. But because they are not armed with the resources, the tools and support, so what ends up happening is that they would not be able to process emotions. They would compartmentalize and pretty much just try to ignore what has happened and then move on with life, right? But what ends up happening is that these people feel that it's difficult to actually emotionally trust someone. And when you don't process these things, eventually it will come up somehow, someday, somewhere. And the person perhaps might feel very overwhelmed and not know how to process all of it, right? Fair enough. So what is the beautiful aspect, right, of an avoidant? So avoidance, because of their need for space, right? Because they feel like they cannot immediately be intimate or close to someone. So naturally, I think that they could be very respectful when it comes to boundaries. Right. They are able to, if you have certain boundaries set, they will respect it because they themselves also have their own boundaries as well. I guess another thing is that they are very calm, right? Because perhaps
compartmentalize.
They are able to compartmentalize and like logically process certain things. And at the same time, I guess perhaps when they were younger, they had to find ways to calm themselves down, right? Because there was no adult who could help them with that. So naturally,
they have to.
They
have to calm themselves down.
So that could be one of their traits as well. So there are beautiful aspects to it as well.
Yeah. But I think you the moment you mentioned about that, right? I think it just kind of like prompted me saying that if you are so blessed to have a secure attachment style, it doesn't mean that you're an angel, because you could be overbearing to someone, right? Because you're like, why you don't want to be best friends with me? Right?
But having said that, I think what differentiates a secure person is that they know that those kind of situations do not dictate who they are.
Right. So they are secure about themselves.
They are secure about themselves. So that's that. But having said that, I think another caveat to put out there, right, is that attachment style, right, is not static. Right. You can really change your attachment style across time, or like through different relationships, right? When you are a secure person, but let's say if you are in a relationship with an avoidant, that could potentially bring out like the anxiety in a secure person as well.
Oh wow, okay.
So it's really a spectrum, right?
It's not cut in stone. It's not neat packages.
Correct.
I think that's what I learned across 4 years in psychology, is really there's really a lot of nuances that it's almost always never like a cut and dry kind of situation. There's so much nuances that needs to come into consideration. But I think having awareness of all these attachment styles is vitally important, because it shows up in even in our work as well, right? So do you have an example of how it actually shows up in our work, right?
I feel I've not really observed much of that. I would think that generally an avoidant person is not able to have difficult conversations. So
criticisms.
Feedback, yes, correct.
Right.
I think they find it very hard to digest a lot of like criticism or like difficult conversations.
Because it's about self-worth and self-esteem
correct.
That comes with having that kind of attachment styles, right?
Correct.
So they take it harder than someone else.
That's essentially it.
Got it. Well, it's always been a very interesting conversation with you. That's why I always had a pleasure with having long chats with you. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best in your path in really, hopefully, one day make an impact in reshaping the education scene as well.
Perhaps we'll see how it goes.
But
thank you for having me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.